climate change and its effect on intergenerational wealth transfer, for which I would like to call upon Mr. Chandru Badrinarayanan, Chief Operating Officer, Blue Sky Analytics.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chandru Badrinarayanan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Blue Sky Analytics. In my prior life, I used to head MSCI in India as the Executive Director, and also was a Senior Director at CRISIL Limited, where I actually worked for 13 years, and have been a banker and also been doing many other roles. Currently, I'm with Blue Sky Analytics, which is a firm which is deeply into climate tech and climate data and climate intelligence. We take data from satellites and use machine language and AI to convert that into climate data sets, which is multifarious uses. But this session is not about actually blue sky or anything like that. This session is more about actually, Aditya invited me to speak on climate change and its effect on intergenerational wealth transfer. Not sure how many of you are really interested in this, but I'll try to make the session as interesting as possible for even those people who are not worried about intergenerational wealth transfer. Okay, so this session is about actually climate change and why does it matter to all of us? How does it affect the world? And what's the world doing about climate change? And even for those people who are not interested into intergenerational wealth transfer, there are a lot of opportunities sitting here. Right now, either in the public markets or the private markets, and even for managing your own wealth. So that's what this session is about. I have around 20 minutes for this session. I'll try to do justice to that. I'm sure that all of you would be aware about the SDGs, all the 18 SDGs which are there, the Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at all of this, climate change actually is the center of all this kind of things which is happening across the world. And it is a unifying factor across all the Sustainable Development Goals. I just thought of, I'm a little bit old school, so I used to like Gone with the Wind. I don't know how many of you here have really know about Gone with the Wind, or about the story of Gone with the Wind and story of Red Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. Now, this is a very famous quote from this movie called Gone with the Wind. It dealt with the American Civil War. Nothing to do with climate change, but just actually, if you just imagine that Red Butler was Earth and Scarlett O'Hara was human, all of us put together. His quote then was, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." So it's like Earth saying, all of us keep saying that, we want to save the Earth, we want to save the Earth. The Earth really doesn't give a damn. We are just guests here, on the planet Earth. And it can just squash us. And it's happening. We are seeing all these things actually starting to happen. It's going to have it is having an impact, and it will have more and more impact as we go through. We have seen COVID. India is not seeing so much of a recession, but the rest of the world is seeing a huge recession. And if you look at the effect of actually, COVID versus recession versus climate change, it's in trillions and trillions of dollars. I put some number here, but these numbers keep changing and it only keeps increasing day by day. So it's a number of $23 trillion by 2050 and everything. This is by actually one of the insurance giants. And this was way back in a little bit around 21-22. But recent events have proven that the Earth is careening towards actually a lot of problems. And the existence of human beings will be in problems. But these also actually bring in certain opportunities, which I will actually deal with later in the slide. But just to say that what is climate change? And there have been actually many people who are on the side saying that, okay, climate change is real. And there are people on the other side saying climate change is not real. So especially if you go to the US, there is a huge schism between the Republicans and the Democrats, the left and the right, saying that climate change is real, not real, and both the sides are getting polarized. But let's forget about that part. But if you look at actually the effects of climate change, one of the biggest effects is human migration. It's huge. And we have seen that actually leading to a lot of clashes. And we can trace out the reason for the Ukraine-Russia war, which is happening also to climate change. It's all about actually controlling the granaries. Ukraine used to be always called as the breadbasket of the erstwhile USSR. And it still remains the breadbasket. And it also actually gives Russia vital routes to the sea routes, the Black Sea route and everything. That's the reason that all these things are happening. Because Russia requires a lot of commodities. China requires a lot of commodities. So there is always a theory that China has been actively supporting Russia because it requires a lot of commodities for its growth. We just surpassed them, 1.4 billion, but they are not small. They are also actually fighting for resources. This is also coming up, having an effect in China actually claiming some parts of India, the Brahmaputra and everything, because that's a water wars which are starting to happen. And very recently I also read that the Taliban is using suicide bombers against Iraq or Iran because they are having a water dispute there, and this is actually taking many forms there. But suffice it to say that human migration is a big, big issue. Loss of biodiversity, see, sitting here, it really doesn't actually, we can't really feel that there is something happening outside this climate change and everything. But every day it is coming closer and closer to us. We can see it, even in places. If you just go, maybe, I don't know how many of you are from Thane. Thane has a water problem, and a lot of societies have been facing this. You just go a little bit away from Thane to the catchment areas. Shapur, that is a catchment area where Thansa and Batsa is there. But those people there in Shapur, they are not having water. They're facing a lot of water crisis, and that leads to a lot of migration into areas like Mumbai, which creates chaos because there are less resources. You have to fight for every inch of the road. So all these things are big problems, which we face, which unknowingly, it's like a boiling frog syndrome. So if you're put into hot water, you really don't realize as a frog. So it just keeps on boiling, and then the skin falls out. So it's a similar kind of syndrome happening across the world for human beings. And it is actually also leading to unknown diseases and everything. I don't know, many of you would have actually heard about the wet bulb syndrome, which is quite prevalent when they talk about climate change and everything. Above a certain temperature, you can't actually, and humidity, when the temperature increases, the humidity increases, you can't really sweat out the heat in your body. And people start collapsing. So which recently, we've seen in places like US, the heat dome, which has been happening in Florida and everything. So all these things are great problems which we are facing. And these have had actually even historical implications. There is a theory that Genghis Khan won many territories because of climate change. It is the reverse of what is happening today. The earth warmed. He used to get actually, those days, it used to be the mules and the horses, which were the main forces of weapon. And because they couldn't get fodder, they couldn't go forth. But as the earth warmed, they started getting more fodder, and then they were able to advance, and they were able to actually conquer many territories. It has the first order, second order, third order derivatives. Climate change brings in a lot of these things, and issues with supply chains are also quite big. Okay, so there is stuff happening. So there are a lot of things, a lot of people put their head together. I myself, I've been part of the committee which has contributed to the sustainable finance regulations in India. And similarly, there have been a lot of other policies and everything which has been happening across the world. So one of the famous one is what is called as the Paris Accord, where they said that we need to contain the average temperature of the world to 2 degrees centigrade. Currently, we are around 1.8 degrees, 1.9 degrees centigrades. And once we cross certain Rubicons, it becomes extremely difficult to actually come back. But there are a lot of scientific developments happening and everything. I'm not a born pessimist, I'm a born optimist. So I can see opportunities actually coming up in a lot of spheres, and we'll talk about that also very shortly. Okay, so I spoke about human migration and the chaos and the unrest. Actually, it brings up. Anybody can point out what is there on the right side? Can you identify what exactly is that? Any guesses? Does it look like an amoeba? Come on. No negative marks for guessing. Okay. So that's a floating structure in Maldives, which is coming up. So which is very similar to if, I'm sure that most of you would have seen Kevin Costner's Waterworld. So this is very similar to that. the structures coming up in Maldives, because Maldives understood that either they'll have to swim or they have to swim. So now they're trying to swim as a country by building all the structures and everything. Now, on the left side is a slum in Dhaka, one of the most congested places. Dhaka is as bad as Mumbai, or probably worse. And you see actually how these kind of migrations are actually leading to a lot of chaos and everything. Now, these also are bringing up new theories and new opportunities and new avenues. Elon Musk, I'm sure everybody knows about Elon Musk, has been actually thinking about this and the opportunities which it actually brings up. And all the space race, he's been launching, heavy-duty rockets and everything through SpaceX. And that's something, all of us today might think it might look very fantastic when we talk about going to the Mars and having settlements in Mars. Till yesterday, a lot of people probably didn't believe that, probably we could land a rover on the south pole of the moon. But it happened. And a lot of things are happening in the background. And every achievement which humanity actually does, it leads to newer and newer areas for breaking up frontiers and reaching to the space. So one of the ideas which has been going around is that, if Earth becomes inhabitable, and we have seen that in many movies, right? Science fiction movies and everything. So one of that is Elysium. If you have seen that movie called Elysium, it's about actually building interorbital cities. So that's Elysium. So that leads to actually certain things. Now the race to the space is also actually bringing up a lot of opportunities downstream. And that is where a lot of investments are actually, waiting to happen. And these are, some of the investment opportunities are current, and some are actually a little bit distant. So one of the things, which I talk about is how this entire climate change is leading to a lot of geopolitical shifts. And a big shift which we are seeing is in actually both the Arctic and the Antarctic. More in the Arctic because there is a northern sea route. And that is where actually a lot of, what happens is as you go closer to the pole, the distance between 2 points is much lesser than, when you're actually near the equator. So the shipping channels, they prefer routes which are actually shorter distance because it saves fuel. And that, if you see traditionally, wherever the shipping routes have gone, that is where the geopolitical shift actually keeps happening. So I presume that you get a gist of, where I'm moving towards, drifting towards. So the political, this thing is, as the Arctic warms and it opens up, there are going to be more sea routes. And that's going to be linking from Canada to China, upper China. So that is where all these things are going to happen. One of the greatest beneficiaries of this is going to be Russia. But it may happen I don't think it's going to happen in Putin's time. Maybe 10, 20 years down the line, this is going to happen. But this is leading to actually shifts. And when it is leading to shifts, when you're looking at actually intergenerational wealth transfer, you'll have to actually take places like Russia seriously. And maybe in 40 to 50 years, all of you may laugh at it, but I'd be actually, not surprised if we see settlements in Antarctica. Because today, Antarctica is unlivable. But in 50 years, Antarctica will be what the equator is today. Equator will not be livable. You can't actually get into 50 degrees, 60 degrees centigrades and everything. So it's simply unlivable for the common people. There will still be people, who can probably afford to live even if it's 70 degrees centigrades and everything, through air-conditioned and climate-controlled and everything. Settlements. That's what Saudi Arabia is actually trying in a place called Neom. It's a strip. It's like a strip, a city which is a big strip. So that's Neom, where everything is actually climate-controlled. So these things do bring in actually, various opportunity, especially in actually, one of the other things, I'm starting to see is a move from places like actually, say, Mumbai, to actually places like probably Dehradun, and in the south, Kodaikanal, and, Munnar, and all those kind of places, because these are places, which will not get affected so much, so easily, and the temperature will be still livable. So that's something, which is a immediate kind of opportunities which are happening. So even Lonavala, but Lonavala is getting crowded, and I think the temperature is also getting actually, worse. But there are actually many places like this where people are starting to move and purchasing, large tracts of land in such kind of places. So that's the real estate. And traditionally, whenever you look at actually, the portfolios, real estate does play an important part of actually many wealth portfolios. Okay, so energy and anarchy. So we do need energy. Can't actually, put up all these lights, mics will be off and no air conditioning. You can't actually run your vehicles and everything if there's no energy. And very often that if there is not enough energy, there's anarchy. We have seen that very recently in Sri Lanka last year when this happened, and there was complete anarchy in the country because they didn't have energy. You simply can't actually grow a country, or a country's GDP doesn't actually grow without energy. So that actually does bring in a lot of issues. Traditionally, we have been actually getting all our energy, that is the countries, from actually fossil fuels. And that's what has been actually leading to most of these issues. So most of the problems of climate change has been happening because of fossil fuels. That's well established in a lot of scientific studies. But then, we cannot afford to have actually fossil fuels and depend on fossil fuels only. The world has been going around with fossil fuels because that's quite abundant, cheap, and you can actually get a lot of fossil fuels from time. I mean, there's no problem with it, and it's also economical. But now, as we are going forward, that's not affordable, and that's why, renewable energy has been coming up. So there are immediate opportunities are things like solar, wind, mini hydel, biofuels, recycling of actually cooking oil. There's also something called a SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. So a lot of airlines are moving towards actually sustainable aviation fuel and everything. Again, there are opportunities for actually people to invest directly or indirectly into many of these ventures. So that's one. I'm a big believer in nuclear energy, and I think that nuclear energy will actually find its place, and we will see more and more action in nuclear energy. Because of various reasons, maybe this session is beyond that scope of actually discussing why those reasons and everything, but there are a lot of technological developments which are happening, and we should start seeing that also in India, along with hydrogen and probably ammonia, which is actually coming up. So also plenty of opportunities in energy storage. So these are also something, which are actually happening. There are also technologies such as radiative cooling, so which actually bring in, energy. Then things like actually, maybe in the next slide, I'll talk about water and food and everything. Okay, the other critical thing for mankind to progress is food and water. We have been actually having problems, but there are again new technologies actually coming up in food and water. There are technologies where you can actually grow your own food by putting up racks in your home, and you can actually control everything through iPhone, and you can just get fresh food, assured food, which you don't think that, whether there is actually any pesticide or any other problem and everything. Everything is actually controlled through your iPhone. So these are actually vertical farms, urban farming. So there are actually now greenhouses where you can actually commercially grow plenty of actually, fruits and staples. So that's happening. But you still can't actually grow things like rice and wheat. It requires a very, very large area. But apart from that, many of the other things can be produced. Growing these things in your house also actually, or in your nearby places, also reduces carbon emissions in transportation and wastage and everything. So, and there's also assurance and transparency in that. Water, there is a lot of action happening in water. One is, of course, water recycling, and there are opportunities in the public markets itself where you could actually look at these kind of opportunities. There are companies like VATech Wabag in Chennai, which is very deep into it, and also actually many other companies like Ion Exchange and all these companies which are there. So these also present opportunities, but there are a lot of private opportunities which are also actually coming up in that. I don't know how many of you would have heard about 3D printing of food. Anybody has heard of 3D printing of food? Now this is also actually coming up from the race to the Mars. So the race to the Mars is also leading up to actually many of these new technologies which are required, the cooling, the air purification, the food part. Because if you have to go to Mars, it takes probably 6 months to 1 year. Now, if you have to actually live in the spacecraft for 6 months to 1 year, if you just take, and the taste buds and everything actually, it is very different. Your entire composition actually starts changing. Your thinking starts changing. People go mad, astronauts. So there are a lot of training which is given to them for that. But these things also actually lead to a lot of other new technologies which are coming up. One of that is 3D printing of food. So you want a dosa, you want a idli, you want a roti, you just put everything into a printer, like a inkjet, and then it starts actually giving out what we want, or a salami or whatever it is. So it just comes out without actually any problems. So that's the 3D printing of food. I'm just trying to simplify it. It's not as simple, but I'm just simplifying that part. But it's an exciting, Israel is actually doing a lot of stuff in that. You can probably look up the mock meats, fake meats, 3D printing of food. Israel is quite ahead in many of these things. So other opportunities, energy efficiency, housing is one opportunity where people can actually look at. And then, you've got actually textiles, very, very exciting in textiles. New materials, new kind of things, new technologies happening. And these are also actually things which are actually leading to saying that, okay, I wear a certain kind of textile, which is not just actually, like a perma press or anything like that, but it also gives my body cooling. It keeps my temperature very less. It can actually consume very less water when I'm washing. So many of these things are actually coming up in textiles. In fact, I don't know how many of you know the bulletproof vests, they are actually textiles. They're not any kind of metal or anything like that. They're made of actually, textiles only. So mobility, most of you would be aware. But there is a big range of actually action happening in mobility. So from micro to macro, there is a lot of actually action happening in mobility. Again, investment opportunities there. Packaging and recycling is very, very exciting. I really hate the plastic bottles which are there. I keep pushing, most of the hotels and everybody, and myself, I carry a small water bottle in my bag, which is very thin. So it is very helpful and everything. But there are actually a lot of action happening in the packaging. And very recently, I'm sure that a lot of you would have seen in WhatsApp, somebody has bought actually water in a paper box. So that's been going around. So there is a lot of things happening in packaging, recycling and everything, and it's a gold mine. So a lot of people are making lots of money in actually recycling trash. Air and health, purifiers and so many other things which are actually happening. Rare earth minerals are important for most of the things, which is actually whether you talk about EV, whether you talk about actually wind energy or even solar panels. So there is actually range of this rare earth minerals which are actually happening. And India was having a problem in rare earth minerals. But last year we found a big deposit in Kashmir. And I think this year we found in Rajasthan. So both places, it is actually giving us sustainability in rare earth minerals. So that is also an area which people can look at. But one of the other exciting areas where people can start participating, whether as a retail today, tomorrow, or maybe 10, 20 years from now, is carbon credits. So that's India. I mean, the range of the carbon credits is actually from $5 to $100. But it all depends upon actually, what is the kind of transparency which you can bring into carbon credits. Based on that, the range is actually happening. And there's a lot of action. It's a $2 billion market currently, small, which is the voluntary carbon markets. But it is set to grow to 100 billion in the next 10 years. And there have been some companies which are listed in the BSE small cap exchange or whatever you call it, which have been actually leading to a lot of wealth creation. But even in the private markets also, there is a lot of action happening in carbon credits and everything. So the other thing is, if you're I've seen actually a lot of family offices investing into, doing public-private enterprises. We are aware, we are rather working with actually two of those family offices, which are actually developing, or rather planting trees in the near Nasik and in the Western Ghat. And one of this thing is 2,200 square kilometer area in the Western Ghats they have taken up. These are public-private enterprises, and family offices are now very serious about giving back, because this is again intergenerational wealth, because they say that all this wealth which we are actually creating, if we cannot give back and if we cannot participate in these kind of ventures of lake restoration and all this kind of things, it's of no use. Nobody is going to be around for enjoying this. So we've got actually in our company, we've got investors from family offices, 3 family offices or 4 family offices, which are very, very serious about climate change. They're doing a lot of stuff like that, and they also want to actually aid and help companies like us. So concluding, there is actually more hope than despair, I would say, in climate change. But we have to be cautious. We cannot be actually very lax about it. And after all, tomorrow is another day, as Scarlett O'Hara says in Gone with the Wind. Thank you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. To felicitate, sir, I would like to call Mr. Ashutosh Bishnoi. Thank you. That was a lot of knowledge. Thank you.